Hey guys, in this video we're going to look at the power and conflict poetry and we're going to focus specifically on the poem Bayonet Charge. So Bayonet Charge was written by Ted Hughes and it was written in 1957, influenced by his father's World War I trauma. It was based on a nameless soldier charging through a field towards the enemy, and the main message of the poem is that patriotism is replaced by raw terror and war is brutal and dehumanizing. A yellow hair in the poem and cold clockwork in the poem symbolize the destruction of nature and how soldiers are treated like mindless machines. The key ideas in the poem are that terror replaces patriotism, so the soldier starts with honor but ends with raw animalistic fear. It shows the reality of war, so that combat is frantic, confusing, and strips away a person's humanity. It demonstrates nature as a victim, so the yellow hair shows how war destroys the natural world and innocent life. There's also the idea of individuals versus the machine, so the soldier feels like a second on a clock, a small part of a cold mechanical system, rather than just being an individual. Let's have a look at the structure of the poem. So it starts in media res, which means in the middle of the action, creating a sense of immediate panic and confusion. There's irregular rhythm and enjambment, reflecting the soldier stumbling through the mud and his frantic breathing. There's also a lot of use of caesura, which is midline pauses, mimicking the soldier stopping to think and the static hesitation of fear. There's also a shift from movement to thought, as the second stanza slows down as the soldier questions why he is there before reality hits again. Let's have a look at the context of the poem. So, Hughes, who's the poet, grew up in the shadow of World War I. His father survived the war, and Hughes was shaped by his father's stories and trauma. He's fascinated by the animal world. So just like the Romantic poets, Hughes often used animals, such as the hare, to show the harsh reality of nature. His focus was on the physical experience, unlike older poets who romanticized war, so he focused on the sweat, mud, and terror. He is also a critique of blind patriotism, so the poem challenges the idea that it is noble to die for your country by showing the reality is just a shouting fear. Let's have a look at the actual poem. So here's the poem. You're more than welcome to pause it and have a read and then continue watching the video. Let's have a look at doing a line by line analysis. So, suddenly he awoke and was running, raw, raw scene, hot khaki, his sweat heavy. Suddenly is an adverb creating in media res, which is called immediate action and mimics the shock of war. The word raw is a repetition here, emphasizing the soldier's vulnerability and physical discomfort, just like an open wound. Stumbling across a field of clods towards a green hedge that dazzled with rifle fire, hearing. Stumbling, the verb choice shows a lack of control and dignity as he is a victim of the terrain. Dazzled is imagery which contrasts with the beauty of light with the deadly reality of bullets. Bullets smacking the belly out of the air. He lugged a rifle numb as a smashed arm. Smacking is an example of onomatopoeia, which creates a violent physical sound. Numb as a shamed arm is a simile, suggesting his weapon is useless, heavy, and more of a burden than a protection. The patriotic tear that had brimmed in his eye, sweating like molten iron from the centre of his chest. Patriotic tear symbolizes his original idealistic reasons for joining the war, and molten iron is a simile showing his emotions have turned to something heavy, industrial, and burning. And the gold of patriotism is now iron paint. In bewilderment, then, he almost stopped. In what cold clockwork of the stars and the nations? Cold clockworks had hard sea alliteration and a metaphor, and it suggests war is a heartless machine and the soldier is just a tiny replaceable part. Stars and the nations suggest that both fate, stars, and politics, nations are responsible for his misery. Was he the hand pointing that second? He was running like a man who has jumped up in the dark and runs. Hand pointing that second is the example of a metaphor for a clock hand, and it shows he is a tool used to mark the time of his own death. Jumped up in the dark is a simile, creating a sense of nightmare and total lack of direction. Listening between his footfalls for the reason of his still running and his foot hung like. Listening for the reason, that part of the line, shows his internal conflict as he is looking for a purpose that isn't there. Enjambment is shown as the line ends mid-sentence to reflect his physical hesitation. Statuary in mid-stride, then the shot slashed furrows. Statuary is a simile, also imagery, similar to Ozymandias, as he is frozen by fear, turned into a lifeless object. Shot slashed is sibilant as its repeated S sound, mimicking the whistling sound of bullets cutting through the soil. threw up a yellow hair that rolled like a flame, and crawled in a threshing circle, its mouth wide. Yellow hair is an adjective for yellow, and it's a symbol of innocent nature caught in man's war. And again, the colour yellow can suggest cowardice or sickness. Threshing circle is an agricultural metaphor, and the field meant for harvesting food is now harvesting death, you could suggest. Open silent, his eyes standing out, he plunged past with his bayonet towards the green hedge. Silent shows that the hare's scream is unheard, just as the soldier's suffering is ignored by the nations. Plunged is a verb showing he has stopped thinking and is now acting on pure, desperate instinct. King, honour, human dignity, etc. dropped like luxuries in a yelling alarm. Etc. is a dismissive word, and it shows that high-minded reasons for war, God, king, country, are worthless in a life or death moment. Luxuries is a simile, suggesting that dignity is something only rich people in peacetime can afford. To get out of that blue crackling air, his terrors touchy dynamite. Blue crackling air is sensory imagery describing the electricity or sound of gunfire. Touchy dynamite is a metaphor. As a soldier has lost his humanity, he's become a bomb that could explode at any second due to terror. Let's have a look at doing a section by section analysis then. So, in lines 1 to 8 is a physical shock, and what happens is the soldier awakes mid-charge, running through mud towards a hedge while bullets fly past him. The in media ray opening creates immediate panic, mimicking the soldier's disorientation. The focus is purely on the body, sweat, breath, pain, rather than the mind. He is raw, suggesting he is like an open wound or a piece of meat, vulnerable and humanized. Techniques here are the in media ray, repetition of the word raw, sensory imagery such as hot, khaki or sweat heavy, and onomatopoeia, for example, smacking. Lines 9 to 15 are the philosophical pause, and what happens is that time seems to slow down. The soldier stops thinking about the enemy and starts wondering why he's actually there and who's in control of his life. The effect of this is that the cold clockwork metaphor suggests that the soldier is not a hero, but a tiny, powerless gear in a giant, uncaring political machine. His bewilderment shows a shift from action to thought, where he realizes his life is being used to point to a second on someone else's clock. Techniques to highlight are metaphor, called clockwork, rhetorical questioning, caesura, as in the dash after stop, and enjambment, where it carries on to the next line. Lines 16 to 19 show that the nature is caught in the crossfire. What happens is a terrified, wounded hare is kicked up by the dirt and crawls in a threshing circle in front of the soldier. The effect of this is that the hare represents the innocent victims of war. This silent scream reflects the soldier's own internal terror, and the threshing imagery, farming, shows how the battlefield, which was once a place of life and growth, has been turned into a machine for harvesting death. The techniques to highlight are symbolism for the yellow hair, sibilance for shot slashed, and gruesome imagery. Lines 20 to 23 are the final transformation. So what happens is the soldier throws away his ideals, such as king and country, and becomes a pure weapon driven by survival instinct. Effects of this is that the word etc. is a brutal dismissal of patriotism. It suggests that honour and dignity are useless luxuries when death is near, and by the end the soldier is no longer a man. He is dynamite, which is an unstable explosive waiting to go off. Techniques to highlight are the list of three, such as king, honour. Dismissal irony is shown in the word etc. A simile is shown in drop like luxuries, and the final metaphor is shown in terror's touchy dynamite. Let's have a look at the overall interpretation of this poem. So, Ted Hughes' bayonet charge captures the terrifying transformation of a soldier from a patriotic human into a mechanical weapon. The poem uses in media res, frantic imagery, and disturbing metaphors to expose the reality of combat, that high-minded ideals like honour and glory are useless when faced with the raw instinct to survive. The poem suggests that war is a cold clockwork that dehumanizes individuals, stripping away their identity and moral purpose. By the end, the soldier has discarded his luxuries of dignity and patriotism, becoming nothing more than touchy dynamite, an unstable, explosive tool of destruction driven by pure animalistic terror. When writing about bayonet charge, we must always link to these 5 checklists, such as terror being more important than patriotism, as fear kills honour, dehumanization, where soldiers become machines, the nature as a victim, where war destroys innocence, and powerlessness, because individuals are just tiny cogs. Let's have a look at which poems we can compare with Bayonet Charge. So we can compare with the Charge of the Light Brigade. Similarities between this poem and Charge of the Light Brigade are the physical act of charging. Both poems focus on the soldiers rushing towards enemy under fire. For example, The Green Hedge versus The Valley of Death. Both poems show a lack of control. So the soldiers are cogs in a larger machine in both poems. They do not choose a battle, they simply follow orders. For example, Cold Clockwork versus There's Not to Reason Why. It also shows the chaos of battle in both poems, as both poets use strong rhythmic devices and vivid imagery to capture the noise and danger of conflict. Differences between Bayonet Charge and Charge of the Light Brigade is the view of patriotism. So Light Brigade glorifies the soldiers as noble heroes, while Bayonet Charge shows patriotism dropping like luxuries as it's replaced by raw terror. The differences, again, is the focus, as Tennyson focuses on the collective glory of the 600 in Charge of the Light Brigade, whereas Hughes in Bayonet Charge focuses on the individual panic of a single nameless man. So let's compare it with Remains. Similarities between both are the reality of war, as both poems strip away the glory of war to show its brutal, messy truth. For example, Smash in the Air versus Rips Through His Life. They both show the soldier as a victim, as both show men who are unprepared for the psychological or physical toll of what they are forced to do. They also both are written in media res, as both of them start mid-action, for example, suddenly versus on another occasion, plunging the reader into the trauma. Differences between both poems are the time frames, because Bayonet Charge is about the immediate terror of the battlefield, whilst Remains is about the long-term haunting of PTSD after the war is over. Another difference is the narrative voice, as Bayonet Charge uses a detached third-person perspective, whilst Remain uses a conversational first-person we or I that feels more personal and raw. Key quotes to revise for Bayonet Charge are as follows. So, suddenly he awoke and was running raw, shows in media res, mid-action start, and it also shows immediate panic and physical vulnerability. The next quote is the patriotic tear, sweating like molten iron. This is a simile showing noble feelings turning into a heavy, burning, and painful burden. In What Cold Clockwork of the Stars and the Nations is a metaphor, showing the soldier is just a tiny, heartless cog in a giant political machine. King, honor, human dignity, etc. is a list, also irony, and the word etc. mocks the noble reasons for war worthless during a charge. His terrors touch dynamite is a metaphor, as the soldier is no longer human, but an unstable weapon driven by pure fear.